Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Maureen Reedy, President and CEO of the Paley Center for Media.
Thank you. Thank you, Kaylee. So I just want to take the opportunity to introduce Kaylee, who, and the Beam. So this is the Beam, and they're both from Suitable Technologies, and they're beaming live from Kansas City, where Kaylee is 100% remotely controlling the Beam. And this is a smart presence system just unveiled, and we're going to hear a lot more from Kaylee and the Beam later in tonight's program, but right now, she's going to take her seat.
All right.
Welcome, everybody, and Happy New Year. I'm so thrilled to welcome everybody to tonight's program. This is the first program in what is sure to be an outstanding lineup for the 2015 Media Council programs, and this is also the inaugural Paley Post-CES Review event. Tonight, what happened last week in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas. We've been talking about this event for almost a year, and we understand that products will always unveil at CES, but our vision, our thought was that once they unveiled at CES, next stop immediately, Paley. And the Paley Center sits at the forefront of the industry, and we're known as the place to come to stay on top of the changes and trends that are happening in the industry. And so if you only walked part of the floor last week, or perhaps if you didn't make it to Vegas at all, fret not, because our panel of experts here tonight will identify what ranked as true innovation, and we'll review the products that will not only change the industry, but will change our lives in the coming years. Before we get underway, I just want to thank so many of our trustees that are here with us this evening and our Media Council members. In particular, a big thanks to Jeff Sands from McKinsey for his tremendous partnership and support, and for underwriting, off the BlackBerry there. You're busted. And you're for your this is like a big client. Totally busted. I know, exactly. And thank you to our product partners, Dell, Parrot, Samsung, Sony, and Suitable Technologies. Following tonight's discussion, we're going to get to do what my 3.5-year-old gets to do every Friday, once a week at preschool, and that is we're going to have show and tell, but with cocktails, so that's even better, where we're going to get to try out these great products and see firsthand what they can do. I just want to take a quick moment and thank the team that made this all happen in record time. Diane Lewis and Susan Copperman and the entire industry programs team, as well as all the folks from our tech, creative services, PR, partnerships, events, operations, all of them together. There's a lot of folks that come together to make this happen. And I just want to mention, like, CES ended Friday and today's Wednesday, so it's 3 business days that they pulled this together. I don't think they've slept since then, so I just want to give a big thanks to the team. Thank you. And then to our outstanding panelists. First, I just have to call out John Miller, our trustee, who was there with us from the very beginning and really helped craft this idea over the course of the last month. And of course, Jason Hirschhorn, Marquez Brownlee, David Pierce, and Nilay Patel. Our sincerest, most heartfelt thanks. But now to tonight's program. The worlds of media and technology increasingly converge and create opportunities in ways that were previously unimagined. To guide us on this exploration of the future of media in a technology-driven world, I am really thrilled to turn things over to Jason Hirschhorn, CEO and Chief Curator for the ReDEF Group and publisher of what I'm sure everybody in this room, like I do, reads religiously, the ReDEF, Media ReDEF newsletter, religiously. Please join me in welcoming Jason, and he'll introduce the rest of our panelists.
So we've got Marquez, John, and David, and these are some of the more knowledgeable and interesting people in the the world of digital media and electronics. And certainly we saw a lot of great stuff, but I want them to introduce themselves, and then we'll start talking about CES, which was a ton of fun this year.
Cool. Yeah, so my name is Marquez. I make YouTube videos about consumer electronics and technology. I've been at it for 6 years now, and so I'm just kind of enjoying talking about tech and what's changed and what's new, and it's a lot of fun.
I'm John Miller, as Maureen said, a trustee of the Paley Center, and a partner in Advancit Capital, an early stage firm that invests in media and technology companies, not least of which is an investor in ReDEF.
Smart guy.
Waiting for that money back.
Have a cup of coffee, buddy.
Meet you at the bar, right? And previous to that, a number of corporate positions, trying to do it in reverse order from News Corp, AOL, Viacom, and the NBA.
I'm David Pierce. I'm the deputy editor at The Verge. I run our reviews and features program and spent most of the last 6 months convincing all of The Verge's staff to go to CES and not get sick and figure out how to navigate all of Vegas. So that's half my job. I love CES.
Cool. Well, I've been going to CES, I think, for about 12 years now, and you know, some years are better than others. And I actually have to say, in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of the same, you know, television enhancements and certainly connected devices. This year, I thought, you know, there were some very, very interesting trends that were happening. Some of the stuff we'll talk about tonight, but you know, certainly, you know, some of the televisions you'll see there, you're hearing a lot about 4K and eventually 8K. So it literally is almost better than the real thing. You're seeing connected cars, a ton of stuff. Actually, some of the most interesting stuff this year was not in the main exhibition, but in the Sands Expo down the block, which was really around the connected home and wearables and health devices and you know, general smart home. Virtual reality becoming you know, a very, very big play there, not only in games, but in, you know, movies and everything else. So this was actually a pretty banner year. I got to walk the floor all day Friday, and you know, I actually think it was a nice jump. But let's start with like the obvious. You know, televisions are a big part of our lives. I know it's the center of my home, and from Saturday to Monday morning, I probably don't leave. So Marquez, we were talking on the phone earlier today about, you know, sort of the explosion of these new beautiful, thin, wide, huge TV sets. You know, you almost need to get a new apartment to fit the TV in now. And there was certainly a lot of talk about 4K and Ultra HD and some of the new technologies like 8K coming out. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I looked at a lot of the CES TVs last year, and there's also a lot of 4K. So these new 4K TVs are coming out, and often when I think about 4K TVs, I'm thinking about who's making videos for those 4K TVs, so who's making 4K videos. So I'm thinking about both sides of it, but this year, of course, we saw a lot of, basically everyone had a 4K TV, and also new display technologies like OLED TVs are everywhere, there's curved TVs everywhere, there's the quantum dot backlit displays everywhere, so a bunch of cool stuff like that.
And for the group, because I was reading an article on VentureBeat explaining all the new TV terms, and it literally will, you know, your head will fall off. So give us a general sense of what the quantum and the OLED means at this point.
Okay, to simplify it, it's mainly about the backlighting. You can say 4K all you want. That's essentially the resolution, how sharp it is. But an OLED TV, for example, doesn't require a backlight. The organic light-emitting diodes are emitting their own light. So instead of having a backlight emitting light for nothing, for a black pixel, you just don't light it. It's really expensive and impressive, but it looks the best, I think. That's the future of TV. Quantum dot is another way of backlighting a TV that requires less filtering because of the pure nature of the light coming through. LED and other sorts of things. And plasma, you've heard of, is sort of on its way out. It's fading out. You didn't really see anything plasma there.
So in short, the colors are getting better, and when it comes, you know, if you're watching a film noir on a huge, you know, 88-inch screen, you're not seeing the glow of the other colors now in the black areas.
Exactly.
You know, perfect.
So colors and brightness and contrast, everything looks a lot better, and that's really the point of all these new technologies, just to make TVs look better. We've also seen all these thinner TVs, so we say looking better, but also the aesthetic of the TV itself. You don't really want a whole lot of big bezel on the sides, so thinner bezels, thinner TVs so that they can sit closer to the wall, all kinds of stuff like that.
Well, and curved now.
And curved TVs.
I mean, if you went into the Samsung booth, which is where I spent a lot of the time, it's, you know, it's almost like half the floor in many ways. You'd want to hug a TV. They're beautiful. They don't have these thick bevels anymore. They're curved, which was a huge, you know, sort of trend that we're seeing there. Why a curved TV? Why does anyone need a curved TV?
I tried explaining it in a video. It's kind of an interesting concept because you would think for a group of people sitting in front of a flat panel, you would want it to sort of stay flat so everyone can see it from all angles. But it turns out looking at a curved TV from different angles can be better for not sitting in the center. Obviously, for immersion, they try to sell you on immersion for the curved TV. So you sit in the center, and it sort of wraps around your vision.
So it has nothing to do with like food coma, and you like sort of, you know, going to the side over here.
Could
nothing
be
like that.
An additional benefit of it. Yeah.
Cool. Cool.
I have a curved TV, and I don't sit very far from it, so I feel like I get the advantage of it being curved.
Yep. And is there any difference in these screens in terms of what looks good up close versus further away? Certainly, people are building out media setups in their homes now, and some you're very close to the screen, some you're maybe 8-10 feet away. Is there a difference?
Yeah, I think 4K is a big part of that. So the size of the panel and how far you sit away from it are what are going to matter most when it comes to resolution. I saw these 8K TVs, which were 89, 95, 98-inch TVs, and you couldn't really tell if it was 8K or 4K from 20 feet away. But once you get closer to it, you can actually see the difference between those middle 4K resolutions and higher 8K resolutions. So when you get close, you notice it's 4K versus 1080p. Stuff like OLED, where the contrast ratios are really high and the colors really pop, you might not notice that until you get really close. But I found I'm a fan of OLED, so I'll be waiting for that.
And one more quick question on TVs. I mean, one of the things that I've lamented for years is, depending on what cable company you have or satellite company you have, the guides have not been great. They almost look like, Atari Pong in many ways. And I did see WebOS and some other things in terms of people really upgrading how you navigate television. What did you see there that sort of caught your eye?
Android TV, which came out last year, is something I saw more often. There was this, I want to say it's a Sony TV, a Sony Bravia TV that had Android TV on it. And when you want to watch TV, it's not necessarily just the TV shows, but it's playing movies, sometimes it's playing games, it's getting other content to be on that screen. And so yeah, like I said, figuring out different ways to do that, whether it's a game console or if it's playing a YouTube video on your TV, things like that I saw more of. Android TV was the one thing that stuck out to me as being particularly good.
Well, and the cool part of that is it's competitive again. Like it used to be that everybody had either their own awful interface or they didn't use one, and they were all awful. Yep. And now they're not only are they good, but they're different. Like LG has WebOS, which it's betting a lot on, and Samsung has Tizen, which it's betting a lot on, and Sony has Android TV, which it and others are betting a lot on. And so I think it used to be that they would compete on price and like how bright they look in Best Buy. Yep. And now the TV space is interesting again for the first time in a really long time. Like even as the 4K and 8K screens get more commoditized, like the thing I like is that you can buy a 4K TV for less than $1 million now, which is new.
It's interesting. I went, going and trying to make myself feel bad about the TV I just bought in December. I was walking around Samsung, and you see a price point for like an 88-inch screen is maybe $9,000, and then the 110-inch screen, which is really what you want for the family, was over $100,000. Why the difference in price for only 12 inches?
Well, that 110-inch TV, by the way, was actually my favorite thing that I saw at CES because we went into the Samsung booth and it's and it's 8K.
I tried to steal it. It's not portable though.
I stole it. It's outside. Yeah. But it's 8K and it's 110 inches and it's 3D. And we went in and we were looking at it and it was like, why isn't the 3D effect working? And he was like, oh, you actually have to be about 30 feet away for it to work. And so he like cleared out all these people around us, and like we walked all the way back, clear to the other side of the Samsung booth. And I was like, oh, this looks great. I was like, I can't hear it anymore, but it looks just fantastic.
There's room for innovation there.
Yeah.
So a couple of things, yeah. One is, I think, one of the questions for all the TV manufacturers that you see these just beautiful stuff that if you saw the screens that we're talking about. But what's the replacement cycle, right? How many people are buying new TVs when? Because the last generation wasn't so bad, right? And so you tend to hang on to them a little longer because it's pretty good. These are better, but that's pretty good. So how long is the people hanging on to these? The second is how much are they connecting them to the internet? Every TV now is internet enabled, right? But how many people actually do it in their house? I'm waiting to see a new stat on it because last year it was under 30%, but I know it's going up fast. But I don't know what the latest stat is on that. If somebody has it, Jeff, you can give it to the crowd. But that's a real key thing: is are these things getting hooked up to the internet? Because now they actually are nicer, when you do it. But you still got to hook it up. And
this brings up a bigger issue you and I have discussed before, which is the refresh rate of hardware at this point is gaining almost to the point of software. Right. And I'm okay to buy a new TV, and I'm unique in that I love this stuff, and it's sort of a hobby for me. But like buying a new TV every 3 years is probably accelerated, but the hardware is so vastly different on a yearly basis now. Not only on just TVs, everywhere. It's a really good question to ask on how these companies are going to deal with it.
Well, you're seeing the pace of hardware innovation sort of get to be like software innovation. It used to be software was so much faster, so much easier. Hardware is just catching up. And if anybody go to Shenzhen, if you go to the market in Shenzhen, the electronics market there, it's unbelievable. You go from day to day, you see shops build new things overnight, right? Literally put out new phones, things like that overnight. So it's just the whole pace is really increasing.
Well, and then on the same token, like as you change the hardware, people, if they buy a TV, they're going to keep it even for 5 years. Like the software in that TV is going to be so woefully outdated 5 years from now that, like, I remember Samsung, I think a couple years ago, had the TV with like a thing that you pull out of it and then put in a new one, and that was the software update. And like how TV companies solve that's not the right answer, but how TV companies solve that, I think is going to be super important.
I definitely noticed this year. I mean, obviously, most of the TVs are connected in one way or the other, whether through Wi-Fi or hardline. And you know, I don't know what you noticed about the interfaces, but I found the remote controls are different now. So they're point and move. You're going to move the dot around the screen rather than just like moving in grids. The difference between streaming services, Netflix or Hulu or any of those integrations at the TV level, it's blurring the lines between what you're getting from cable and what you're getting from the services. So the channels are actually merged now, and when you search for something, everything comes up. And I was wondering, do you think that the TV companies have a moment in time here where if they solve the discovery problem with guides and the integration of all these different services? I mean, if you go into my home right now, I've got 4 different video boxes. I've got a cable box. I've got a TiVo. They're all sort of different remotes. Are you going to start to see that maybe a cable card into a TV or internet into a TV, and then that TV will be the guide, not the cable company? Do you see anything like that happening?
I think eventually we'll get there. I think the cable companies have this just gigantic entrenched interest that no one they work with has any reason to blow up yet, and so I think there are all kinds of reasons why that's
they
just
want to
slower
blow them up. I don't know that they would.
Well, right. I think that they know it's a terrible idea to do that. But I also think that like this idea, everybody's been talking about unbundling TV, and this idea that you can just go get what you want, and if everybody has Netflix, you can just have Netflix. But I feel like, and I saw this talking to people at CES, and people like just sitting down and watching TV. And it's like you sit down and you're like, I don't know what I want to watch, and you're just like, Ice Road Truckers, that's good enough, and I'll watch that. And then I think that's not going away. Yeah, and I think until like that, I think is the real problem somebody has to solve, because like the interface will get better. And somebody will make Comcast do better because they'll have to, and they'll do better, and it'll either be Comcast or it'll be somebody else. But I think the biggest problem to solve is that.
It's a really interesting thing, because if you're Comcast, you say, hey, wait a minute, I'm delivering all these shows. If you're Android or some licensee of Android or Google, you're saying, wait a minute, I have an internet connection. It looks across not only the shows, but the internet and so on. And if you're the TV manufacturer, you go, yeah, but it's my screen.
Right.
Anything that gets onto my screen, that comes through me. Yep. So I think that's one of the big TBDs, right? That no one's figured out who actually wins that one.
Sure. Before, and I guess we talked about this today, but one of the things you're seeing affect with the content industry is that now there are so many places to put your content. If you're a content company, the effect is that you're seeing windowing becoming much shorter. So what is on Netflix one week may not be there in 2 or 3 weeks, and then it moves to Hulu, and then it moves to some other streaming service. And it's a boon time for a lot of the content companies, but it's not the greatest user experience if you're a user, because content is moving like water through stones constantly. I want to switch gears and talk about wearables. We've heard a lot, certainly with the Sony hack and other breaches of data this year around privacy, and yet every single thing at that show was connected, whether it was a wearable or a TV or anything, tracking something that you're doing. And yet people complain about privacy of data. First, tell us what you saw, David, in terms of wearables that you thought were interesting or even usable at this point. And then what are the implications of us giving up all that data sort of unknowingly at this point?
Yeah, well, I think it's a couple things. I think to the first point, there are wearables everywhere. And I think the thing that was so interesting to me was that there weren't any particularly interesting wearables. They're just sort of everywhere now. Like Intel made this thing called the Curie module, which is like this big and has everything you need to turn something into a wearable. It's like you replace a button on a jacket and it starts doing all the tracking stuff that it needs to. Sure. Or you can make a smartwatch without trying very hard now. Like there was this whole row of Apple Watch knockoffs, which it's like a knockoff of a product that doesn't exist. But they were Apple Watch knockoffs for like $30, and they work really well. Like these things aren't hard to build now. And so I think what's happening and what's so interesting is that what we originally thought wearables were going to be for is now about to be built into other things. And I think sometimes it's going to be watches that look like watches. Sometimes it's going to be jackets. Sometimes it's going to be all kinds of things. But which brings up to the second point, which is that once everything has these sensors that can track your steps and your sleep and your food to some extent, like we're just sort of aimlessly in the background collecting all of this data. And the two questions that I think we and the manufacturers that we buy from are going to have to answer are, what do I do with all this data? Like me personally, I know how many steps I take and I know how many hours I sleep, but how do I sleep better and how do I take more steps? And what are you allowed to see and do with that data on my behalf? Like this question of what insurance companies can and can't get from wearables. Like there are some, I think it was Bloomberg that gave everybody wearables and was like, I'm going to track you from now on. And that's like, that's a strange thing. There are upsides to that, but there are also huge downsides. And I think a lot of places have said that this data is it's not perfect data. It's not to be trusted yet in a lot of ways. And yet it's about to become a way that we are measured and tracked. And for all of the benefits, there are a lot of potentially really scary things that I don't think have come to any kind of head yet, but seem like they're inevitably going to.
I think it's going to be a big deal when it happens. And also, I was talking to somebody at the show who they wanted to not be named, but they're a company that tries to put a organize all of your connected devices in the home. So it serves as the control point for all your connected devices.
So every company at CES.
Yeah, so every company at CES, right. But I said, well, so how many readings, if I had this stuff in my house and, in a Nest and this and that, I mean, how many readings would you get out of my house a day? And the guy made these excuses. We're a startup, it's early, we're not really set up right. I said, how many readings? And the answer was 1.5 million. And I go, where do you think that goes? And he goes, basically continuous. I mean, and you just think, oh my God, and then, and then if you're carrying, your wearables on top of that and your so-called online devices like your phone on top of that, the amount
it's like you can't even lie anymore. It's terrible.
It's just an extraordinary amount of data. So one, there's the technical compilation of it, and to your point, how do you use it, and who else gets to use it? There's the regulatory environment around this, which doesn't even exist. I think that the government doesn't see this one coming. And
we talked about it. Like I was asking Hossein Rahman, who runs Jawbone, which is a wearables company. Has any health insurance company ever reached out to you to say, hey, if your clients or your subs wear the bracelet, we'll give them breaks if they are at a certain data level. And you think of that as a positive thing, but the negative aspects that data could be used for are really what I think John's talking about in terms of just the unknown. And I've been on the internet, I guess, for close to 20 years now, and God knows what I've given away and how I'd ever give it back. And now they know I'm sitting in my room for 11 hours watching Breaking Bad. That's not a good thing. So,
well, it's a trade-off, right? Like it used to be, we all do this with Google too, where it's like I give you all this information in exchange. You give me like a really great way to do email, and you give me really good search results, and you give me, the thing on my wrist shows me where I have to go next, or my flight information, and that's all. I think most people have just gotten used to that, but then this whole other thing happens when you suddenly know like what I'm eating and when and how much and when I'm asleep and when I'm home and when I'm doing the dishes, and like when you go like another level down, it starts to get a lot harder.
What did you see in the connected
I like that
stuff?
at least Google is giving us back some information like that in some sort of helpful way. Like I use Google Now all the time, told me when I needed to leave to get here based on traffic, just because I put this address in my calendar for this time.
Super early.
Yeah, I mean, it was telling me all these things to help me out. Tells me how many steps, and obviously it's just counting, and maybe it could just count for the sake of counting, but then it can tell me how to get to my goals more readily. So,
but I will say that gave. I started to think about it. I was walking the floor really on the wearable side and everything, and all of a sudden, think about the impact to a personality where everything you're doing on a daily basis is essentially graded. You'll probably hook up with your friends on Twitter or Facebook so they've walked faster than you did. Or, everyone's now 15 minutes earlier to the meeting. I mean, it becomes...
I finished Breaking Bad before you did.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. For the first time, I was thinking about the social implications of all these things. Not just the benefits, but also that you're essentially playing a game all the time, and there's an anxiety that you're never off.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think you're young, so I probably wouldn't have thought about that when I was your age now. Now I'm just complaining about everything.
Yeah, I mean, I see people on, using these things like Fitbit and counting, and the Nike step trackers where you can compare directly to your friends how many steps you've taken during the day, and whether or not you want to make that competitive is up to you. But yeah, it's weird that people, I guess it's natural to compare yourself against another person's measurements and see who's doing better at something, but
it's everything now.
Yeah,
so,
it's all the measurements.
Well, and I think really quickly, a couple of years ago, if you were in the media business, everyone talked about the battle for the living room, right? Everybody remembers the battle for the living room. Who was going to control the living room? And then the OSs were coming into the living room. Windows, I forget the Windows Media thing, whatever that was called, and then Android and Apple, and everyone was trying to take over the living room. Yep. Who cares about the living room? I mean, this is literally, it's literally everything, right? Yep. I mean, it's everything in your home and out of your home, and it very quickly has morphed to this, sort of incredible high stakes game of what's going to be, organizing all of that.
So when we hear about, the sharing economy and we read about things like Uber and other services, they've done great jobs at taking inefficiencies out of markets. So the connected home was a big thing, certainly a huge theme. So, a couple of years ago, you may have seen, TVs or your stereo system or your DVD player. This year there were sinks, there were washing machines, there were irons, there was like literally, a connected hair cutter. They were giving people haircuts on the floor of CES with some sort of connected hair cutter. David, like what were some of the benefits of the connected home in terms of efficiencies or money savings, and then some of the pitfalls?
I did,
yeah,
every single day.
So you got the new Flowbee is what you used, essentially.
Thank you.
Well done.
No, so I think the thing that was really cool for me about CES was we're finally starting to answer the question of why we should connect all the things in our home. Because before it used to be like, oh, when you're coming home, it'll open your garage door and put on whatever music you want. And like, I don't think most people care about that.
Sure.
But then there was, at CES this year, there was, I think it was Whirlpool made a washing machine that its whole reason for being connected to the internet is that it will wait to do the load until it is the cheapest to do so, to draw the power to do so. And it knows that because it's connected to your Nest thermostat. And it's this very simple, completely invisible thing that you never have to touch. And it just works, and it just saves you money. And that's the kind of thing, like, I think that's when the connected home is actually going to matter, is when you set it up, you like turn it on, and then you wash your clothes like you've always washed your clothes. Sure. And because I think the barrier for entry for things like that is so high. But if you can say, I'm saving you money, like LG had a refrigerator with a door that was inside the door, and like that's neat. But I think it's much cooler when these things start to be interconnected in really practical and really useful, invisible ways.
Well, I like that there was a connected earpiece to help you hear, and very stylish. So it actually looked cool in multiple colors. It was meant to be a fashion accessory, but it was connected to your phone, your smartphone. And so it would learn what you're setting, and it could have different settings. So it would learn where you were, because of the GPS in your smartphone, and change the settings in your hearing aid according to where you were automatically.
Yeah, I like the whole concept of devices learning the way you do things and adapting to you and learning to do better behavior, essentially, because of why it's connected.
Yeah, John's like, Jason's coming, turn it down.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think that was the most interesting thing about CES to me. Like, everybody talks about, there's no smartphones anymore, there's no tablets at CES, and all that may be true, but what's happening instead is there's all this interesting technology that works with those things to do things that you wouldn't notice. They just make your life better. Like, that's the great promise of technology, is not like, look at the screen, it's that it makes your life better.
It's been happening for years, but what I saw of the phone, the tablet, and now even watch, it is a remote control to everything else. And certainly you've seen companies like SmartThings and others who are becoming sort of the OS for lots of these devices. One of the things I wanted to ask you guys was, in the years that I've been going, innovation seemed to come from the big companies, but now we're seeing Google buy Nest, we're seeing Samsung buy SmartThings. Are you seeing a trend in that where hardware is becoming a very big venture capital based business, similar to the way that sites or software was? And for the first time, it seems like that the big electronics companies are buying innovation. Maybe they had done it in the past, but it didn't seem to be as marquee as it is now. Are you seeing that trend at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a variety of reasons that's true. I think one is Kickstarter has been a huge thing where companies can get the money they need to do things without having to build it first, which has its own issues where they can just take the money and run. We had a friend of ours at CES who came up to us and he was like, well, we raised a bunch of money on Kickstarter, and now we're thinking maybe we just won't make our product. And he was kidding, but he was like, what if we just didn't make our product and took this $50,000 or whatever, played the slots and went to Mexico? And he was like, would you, The Verge, want to make a video about that? And we were like, yes, we would.
And he understood that's called fraud, right?
Well, yeah. But it's not, though. Like, Kickstarter has all these weird policies in which they write you a check and then you can leave. But that's a whole separate thing. So, but
and I took money from Miller and I could have done that.
That's what I'm saying. But then I think one of the other things that was at CES that we've seen a lot of is 3D printers, which has enabled this gigantic world of being able to really quickly prototype something, and you can just build it. If you have an idea for something, you can just make one. Like there was one of my colleagues is at the auto show in Detroit, and there's a car that is 3D printed. They just made it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I don't know if we're going to get to it, but
Yeah,
cars.
well,
it used to be
we're going to go into Q&A, but I want to get two more topics in there.
It used to be safe in your car. You'd have a few minutes to yourself. That's done.
I will say this about the 3D printers. It was pretty amazing to just sit there and them creating like a bust of you, like while you're sitting there. And I'm a little bit of a geek, so I collect like Steve Jobs dolls and old like Darth Vader stuff. And if I could literally take a picture of Stan Schumann and they could print me a doll of Stan within 20 minutes right there, and it was pretty. I mean, it's pretty wild stuff, and the detail is beyond anything I've ever seen before. So let's jump to the connected car.
We got to do car and VR. I don't know how much time we have.
Car and VR, and then we'll go to Q&A. I know I'm going to be late, but all these people don't have anywhere to go. It's snowing outside. We're stuck here for the night. I'm kidding. So the connected car. This is something that seems like a really good idea and yet freaks me out. Because I don't think a connected car would work in New York City. You got to have you got to have real tough sensors. But certainly if you walked into one of the alternative halls, you saw a lot of what the connected car was doing, not only in terms of the information systems and the kind of information that you can get to the car, but also the driverless cars and the navigation, which is the spooky part. So what did you guys think? What did you see there?
I did get to demo some of the connected car and the driverless car stuff. The i3, which was connected to a smartwatch app, and you could essentially summon the car to your location. I think it was via Bluetooth. Where you'd press the button on the watch, and the i3 would pull around the corner, drive up to you, and unlock the door and wait for you there.
Batman's been doing that for 30 years.
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of stuff, when it's smart, it essentially improves your life. You don't have to go up to it. I kind of imagine people like standing outside of a supermarket waiting for their car to come up to them, which is a little weird.
Who do you complain to when the car makes a wrong turn?
That was another question: is what are you insuring against?
Is there a virtual wife in the car or anything like that?
I sat in the back seat and there was no one there. The steering wheel was whipping around and it was making weird moves, but it was still really interesting to watch. And then the question about insurance was cool too.
Yeah, did you feel safe, or was it at a speed or sort of in a protected environment?
It was slow. It was going around a barrier and it was safe enough that I didn't feel like the need to interrupt and grab the steering wheel, but. There's other more advanced things where you see all these sensors around moving cars with adaptive cruise control and lane changing to the point where you're almost just sitting in the car and letting it drive itself. Obviously there's legal implications with that, but so far the computers seem to be doing a really good job of improving the driving experience for people who like that.
So with the connected car and with the connected home, we live in a world where we're not always connected, or the connections are not, the uptime isn't there. I was looking at locks that you would, be wired to your home. What if wireless goes down? Does the car stop? Are you locked out of your house?
Yeah.
What are those implications? Like, what are the fail-safes?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that question, and I haven't even considered that because you just kind of take internet for granted. If the internet is here, everything's fine. The power's here, everything's fine. But should your smartwatch battery die, where's your car? If the battery of something fails, then you don't have power, then something goes wrong.
Apple Pay, your phone dies and you ask to charge so you can pay?
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
There's a whole bunch of weird circumstances where if you don't have internet, things just fall apart.
What did you see in the connected car?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think to that point, what's still being done and what they're going to have to do for much longer than I think any of these companies want to do is teach these cars how to fail gracefully, right? Like if that lock breaks, you have a key. And that's like you have to. And like the Mercedes made this wild concept car where instead of two people sitting forward and two other people sitting forward, you're actually facing each other. It's like sitting on a train car. And it's like, of course, because nobody has to drive, so why face out? You might as well face the people you're with.
Well, quiet time.
Yeah, nah, overrated. But then there are these other cars where the car, I can't remember which company it was, but they announced a car that lights up differently whether a person is driving it or it's driving itself.
Yep.
And so all these things that they're building sort of these fail-safes in where like hopefully you'll have a car key and hopefully you'll remember where you parked it so that if your smartwatch dies, you'll go get it. And I think that all these companies want to pretend that we're almost there, that we're right on the cusp of this thing being in every car. And it probably will be. I mean, there are sensors in cars. It's a lot of what we're doing is just an extension of like the reverse cam that beeps at you when you get too close.
I definitely felt Tesla, leaning in on these guys, where you saw Uconnect and lots of these other companies that have the onboard dashes realize that you may want to set your temperature before you get in your car, or start it and warm it up, or get the directions before you're in there. And it seemed like everybody was doing that.
What struck me real quick, just, I thought of driverless cars as a Google X project.
Yep.
It's an industry thing. I mean, it's competitive. There's all these kinds of people doing it now, and so it's not just a a wild fantasy thing. This is like they're really doing it.
One of my favorite movies ever is Minority Report, and when Steven Spielberg did that movie, he hired futurists to see what the life would be like in 20, 30 years, and it wasn't where everything was new. It was sort of a mixture. But if you look back at that movie, which is still a great watch, and you see presence-related advertising, if you see driverless cars, they pretty much were on the money, and maybe it's even happening a little faster. Let's talk about virtual reality before we go to Q&A. Certainly Oculus, and I think we have downstairs afterwards the Samsung Gear headset. Virtual reality is pretty awesome. I've jumped off a building. I've been in the gravity scene.
Can I say, if Oculus had the building, right?
Yep.
So Oculus had this setup where you would jump off a building, and the guy I was with walking the floor, put it on, would not do it. Yep. Right? He literally went to one knee.
Which would make him sane.
Yeah. But I mean, it's amazing how fast it's gotten good, and it overrides your knowledge that you just put on a pair of goggles, right? And you're just wearing those goggles, but he was not taking a step.
What's the stuff that's blown you away about virtual reality? We hear, obviously it started with gaming technology. It's clearly moving into film now, but the implications are in medical, are in education, are in travel. What are you guys thinking about VR these days?
I've only played with a limited time with Oculus, and I played with the Samsung Gear VR at the CES demo. So I've seen like the incredibly immersive stuff that you can do with it. So at this point, I'm just concerned with what people do with that. What kind of games and apps and things people do with that. I was playing with these drones, which have cameras on them. So they're flying machines with cameras, and you need one person on a controller to fly the drone, and you need another person on the controller to steer the camera around and look at it.
Well,
but I guess
some of the drones now have cameras that'll lock onto you, though.
Right, and that was awesome. But then there was the possibility of having a camera on your face with the Oculus VR and the image of what the camera is seeing, and you move your head around, and it's moving the camera around with you as you look down from 400 feet at whatever you're shooting.
Which obviously has implications on aviation and all these kinds of things. I mean, the idea of a helicopter parent is actually reality now with these new drones that follow the kids. What I found interesting talking to some of the Oculus guys and some of the VR companies is they've hired ethicists and psychiatrists and doctors because everyone's reaction to virtual reality is quite different, and you can't just go make a 1.5 hour narrative about in VR. Someone may throw up, so they're moving very, very slowly. But some of the stuff that I've seen in the demos that I did, as John said, I walked up to the edge, and I was sitting on a chair on the ground. I knew I was on a chair on the ground, but it was hard to get me to jump off the building. They put me in the virtual gravity scene from Gravity, where the ships, were sort of crashing into one another. I went in the Everglades. I won at poker, which has never happened before in real life. David, what did you see that you liked?
I still remember my first ever Oculus demo, which was now 3 CESs ago, and they came and it was the tech of it was awful. It looked like you were looking through a screen door, and the thing was slow and laggy. And it's still, their whole demo was that you're walking through a spaceship. That was it. You can't do anything. You just walk. And it's breaking down a little bit, so there were sparks flying everywhere. And I remember walking, and the guy was like, you can move your head around, And I was like, oh, right. And so I turn and look, and there's sparks coming down. And I literally, I panicked and yelled. And he was like, that's why VR is great. And it's true. Like, the thing I saw this year that was kind of amazing was this company called Sixth Sense built controllers that you hold in each of your hands that represent lightsabers. Well, they did in this demo. I guess they could be anything. Sure. But the big challenge for VR so far has been this sort of cognitive dissonance of it looks like I'm somewhere, but none of the rest of me is there.
And
the big challenge was how do you solve that? But when you had these controllers in your hand, the first thing he had you do is just turn your hand around, and it just instantly felt real. And it's incredible, and I played this game where there's just a thing moving around shooting at you, and you have to fend it off with lightsabers. And I played this game for 15 minutes, and that was it. That was all I was doing, and it was just incredibly fun. And you can play a million different times or watch a movie a million different times and never see it the same way twice, because there's always stuff going on behind you, there's stuff above you. And like, I think we have a long way to go before people figure out how to like make a movie that works that way. But it's going to be incredible.
Two real quick things I know.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a whole new medium, and you got to make stuff that works for the medium.
It is one of those things where it's a moment where this is like the monolith in 2001. It's a different step.
And second, for the panelists, where was Oculus located? With what group of companies at the show?
It was in the Wynn Suite that I was in. I don't know.
Okay. On the floor, it was with all the gaming companies. So even though there's all these applications for VR, it's pretty clear where they're going first. It's a gaming company first.
Yeah, I'd say that that where I've been really interested in it is certainly within film. I've been spending time with a company called John VR, which has developed different ways to shoot a movie, and it's just going to change the way that storytelling works. It's going to change the way that doctors do surgery. It'll change the way that kids get educated. You'll be able to, imagine going to the pyramids or the Valley of the Kings with a headset, and it's just day one. You've heard a lot about some cool things here today. I would say before we go to Q&A, definitely go to the Verge or check out Marquez's videos because they do a great overview of these things. And if you could ever get to CES, Vegas, takes stomach. But if you could get to CES, it really is a unique type of thing. If you are, have that childlike interest in these things, but also for those of you that work at media companies and else, all these companies are coming in to pitch you and to see how you can work together and try to see these demos. It's hard to sort of explain it here. Let's go to some questions, and we've got, we've got some cool demos coming up. Right over here.
Yeah.
Mike's coming for you.
Hi. Really awesome. Thanks a lot for doing this. For the 4K video stuff, you quickly mentioned, Marquez, you quickly mentioned who's making 4K video now. I was wondering if you guys had thoughts on not just watching 4K, but who's making the content? How do we embrace that, and how do we start really utilizing that, medium?
Yeah, there's two halves of that I see. There's the professional 4K stuff, the stuff you see on Netflix, the stuff you watch on TV, and then there's the people at home buying a 4K camera and shooting their own 4K videos. So in that section I see, last year there was I think one new 4K for $4,000 camera by Panasonic. And this year there was a trio of $1,000 camcorders that shoot 4K. There's a new GoPro that shoots 4K. There's a new action camera that shoots 4K. So home videos will be in this higher resolution, and that's awesome that you can put it on your TV and see it there. I think the more difficult part that I understand less about is shooting House of Cards in 4K and being able to shoot that and show it in its full resolution on a 4K TV. That other half is a different industry.
All the media companies are starting to create 4K content.
Yeah.
Last CES, or maybe the CES before when it was introduced, no one had it, so it was sort of like reference material. But certainly people like Netflix and others are starting to lead the way. And now you ask the question, so who's going to do the 8K content? I think one of the themes we didn't talk about, which is if you saw a revolution in publishing years ago with blogs and whatnot, the ability to have steady cams, the ability to have cheap 4K cameras, the drones that are going on. If you look at the videos for the company DJI, who is sort of one of the leading Chinese drone companies, the new version they just released called the Inspire, you could shoot a scene from The Shining, sort of the overview scene, if you know how to drive your drone now, and it's just beautiful. That's definitely a trend we saw there.
Well, it's interesting. I feel like the problems aren't what we thought they would be. 4K TVs are cheap now, and there are lots of ways to watch 4K content when it's there. But the strange problem is we don't have the bandwidth yet to do it from Netflix, and things like 4K Blu-ray players don't really exist. Panasonic showed one, and it was a big deal. And the Blu-ray, the Blu-ray technology can actually support 4K, but there aren't players for it yet. So we're in this weird space where the TVs are cheap and accessible, the content is a lot easier and cheaper to make, and it's we have to solve that middle part. And I think that's going to happen a lot this year.
Yeah. Questions, anyone? Right over here.
So one of the biggest announcements at the show was Sling TV. I was just wondering why you guys didn't think that was a big enough thing to talk about.
It's actually on my list here, given I was president there a couple of years ago. My question was, why did it take 7 years to get out? Well, we pitched them 7 years ago. What Sling TV did was there is now a new tier package, I believe of 11 channels. A lot of it's sports, if not all sports. At a, sorry, what were the details? Yeah.
Turner was in there.
Yeah, Turner. So it's a lot of sports stuff. The implications are huge in that we talk about the unbundling of television. It's not going to happen overnight. TV's not dying overnight. And I don't think that it's an a la carte question. I think what is going to be the biggest change to the television industry is the smaller tiered packages, less channels for a cheaper price is going to hurt, some of the companies that you see out there, maybe the Discoveries or the Viacoms or the A&Es, because, when you go and do a cable deal, the way that it works is like, we'd like Nickelodeon and MTV, and then they say, well, that's nice, but if you want them, you get 19 channels that no one wants. So this is the beginnings of that, and what I found super interesting was like ESPN is the 800-pound gorilla of cable. You cannot take off ESPN in your household, and the fact is they do bundle their channels with other things, and yet they were the premier channel in the smaller tier. So years after the Sling acquisition, this was a major talk, and listen, I think it also proves the point, and John has mentioned this many times in conversation, is that CES started as a consumer electronics show. It really is an interactive show now. It is a content show. There is no content company on earth that is not at CES doing content deals. It's probably where the beginnings of the Sling TV discussions happened, and they're licensing everything. But I do think that it's a marked moment where the big bundle starts to crumble slowly, not in terms of a la carte programming, but in terms of a cheaper tier. And that's certainly, I mean, I can tell you, like when we first went to CES at Sling, I wanted bodyguards because, like, guys on Comcast wanted to kill me. They didn't even. I was a murderer, not a thief. I get off the plane at McCarran. I'm going down the escalator, and there's a huge 200-inch plasma with a Sling ad for the Sling TV on there, and I'm like, how things have changed. So yes, it was actually a big moment and a big announcement, and I really think a major step, or major step depending on which way you look at it, for cable. Cool. Right over here, last one, and then we'll go to the next. Go.
You mentioned something that I thought was really important when we were talking about the connected home, which was something could actually save you money with how you do your laundry. Could each of you identify whether it's in connected home or wearable tech? To me, anything successful has to solve a problem. So did you see anything in wearable tech or connected home that you personally felt either saved money, saved time, or did something that was pretty basic in terms of, wow, I wish I had that because it would help me do something?
Yeah, you ever go on an airplane and read Sky Mall? And you say, who are these people? So there's a little of that going on in the connected home. I think David pointed it out, which is there's a lot of stuff doing a lot of stuff, and whether or not it's useful yet.
But did you see anything
Yeah,
that you thought,
you guys are better than me.
It would do something?
Well, as I mentioned, I like the hearing aid, but I don't need it yet. But I do think that there was a lot of just experimenting going on, right? That it wasn't the most basic, the stuff that we're going to end up really, incorporating in our lives. But I think it's really technology is in search of a purpose, but you can see it's coming, and I suspect even next year will look very different as a result.
So I think the thing for me that solved the most obvious problem was not even connected. It was this Samsung washing machine that had a sink on top of it, which is like this very obvious thing that you just you can put everything in the sink and pre-treat it, and then you pick it up and all the water goes down into the washing machine, and so do your clothes. And they're saying they're like, well, you save water, you don't drip all over your floor while you're moving your clothes, and it's all in one place now. And I was like, okay, just stick a dryer under there, and then you're good.
That was one of those things I didn't know I had a problem, but now I know.
That's exactly right, and it's one of those things, like, as soon as he says it, you're like, oh, of course, it's so obvious. And there were little moments like that all over CES that, to me, are why CES is so much fun. It's where people just, they took this thing, and they're like, well, your sink is here, and your washing machine is here, and you do this all the time, so what if we just put them together?
Yeah. I think the one thing that came to my mind when you said that, it wasn't at CES, but it's something Tesla's doing where they have this adaptive air suspension in their cars, where if you come up to like a really high driveway or something, you can tell the car in its connected interface to raise the suspension to not scratch the front of it. And after you do that enough times at your own house, for example, the car looks at your GPS location, and as you pull up, remembers that this is a place where I need to do that, and raises it before you have to ask. Saves you a little bit of time. It's the first thing I thought of, but that's something that would be really useful.
I can't say that I saw anything that was like overtly useful.
Yeah.
I'm now very insecure about my hand washing for sure. I will say a little disconnected from this, and then we'll go to Q&A. The coolest thing that I saw was I just ran into it. I was in the Panasonic booth, and Panasonic and SAP have done a test partnership where they built a series of cameras that they install into a stadium or some sort of playing field. and it maps all the players as they're playing the game, and you have real-time statistics of all the players, like as the camera follows them, and the implications I mean, it's freaky Orwellian stuff. It's like, you know, the coach could look at the tablet and say, well, this is usually where Jason stops running, and we're going to take him out now because he's not optimal. So the real-time calls, but think about those implications for the workplace and other places. It's really, everything was about tracking and optimization. And I'll send it around to Paley, and maybe they can send an email, but the demo is really wild. It looked like something out of a sci-fi movie where, like, you know, when these movies that were made years ago when, like, the CIA guys are tracking everyone on the ground and know who it is, except these were soccer players. So listen, you guys did a great job.
You got Scott over
I got Scott, and then
time?
we'll go. No one's gonna, or then we'll go into QAs. It is Scott. Come on. Yeah.
You got to end on Scott.
So I haven't gone for years and years. Curious about your observations of the things that you saw, the disruption that you really only get when you're there. And one that I think about is the company with the biggest booth with the least to show. I think we all know who that was, sadly.
Yeah.
I'd be curious for you to talk about that, walking some of the aisles, the sense of the Asian activity that's taking place there. There were places that if I was dropped on the floor, I would assume I was in Hong Kong or Beijing, and things like that. The things that you can't get unless you're there.
Yeah, I would say that Asia dominated, not only from these brands that you never heard from, but you know, OEMs. And then I was most impressed with the non-hall at the Sands Expo, where you're looking at the connected home and the wearables, which was outside of the main hall, and what is ultimately going to go with how you control your home, how you optimize your home, how you get into your home, how you surveil your home. I saw a ton of information going on there, and yet it was an ancillary part of the show.
Yeah, I would just jump in, and to your point, Scott, you know, it used to be when I would go, you were concerned with 5 to 10 really big companies and what they had to show, and that was the whole show. Now it is consistent with what we're saying about the proliferation of hardware. It is just all over the place, all these new companies that you've never heard of, many from different parts of the world, and how they're moving really fast at it.
And this is why I think you're going to see more acquisitions by the major hardware companies, the way that you do in the sort of the software market.
Yeah.
The thing I kept noticing, which was sort of an odd but funny problem for a company like Samsung, which is not the company you're talking about, I'm sure. But they have this horrible problem of showing what's so cool about some of their things. Like a huge part of Samsung's keynote at CES was about the smart things and the connected home and piecing all these things together. But you walk into their booth and they've just made a circle out of like everyday household items. And I think the challenge that they have, and the funny thing about being at Samsung's booth and at Sony's and everywhere, was them being like, well, what's interesting is not each of these individual things like it used to be with these huge TVs, and they're still huge TVs, but it's more in how they work together and how they fit in as a part of a whole ecosystem. And everybody wanted to talk about platforms, and everybody really liked talking about being open and how they work with others. And Samsung is, you know, in every other part of its business trying to just be Samsung and pull everybody out. But with this Internet of Things and all this connected stuff, they're like, everybody's just playing along, and all these companies being part of this same giant ecosystem was really exciting.
Because it's no longer a battle for the living room or any one piece of it. You're trying to play for the whole, and that's
points are
a
different.
big game.
Before I get sent to detention, I just want to thank Marquez, John, and David. Great job. And now we've got some cool product coming up on stage. All right, so we'll start with Kelly, who's got some good-looking devices there. Go ahead.
We're real excited. So I actually have 2 of our winners, and I look forward to all of you being able to put your hands on them, because it's like being a teacher or a candy store and having the candy, and I'm not going to let you touch it. So, so at CES, we won the Innovation Awards for 2 of our products. One is our XPS 13 here, and one is our Venue 8 7000 series. So I'll talk first about the XPS 13. So this is the world's smallest 13-inch notebook. It is just over 2.6 pounds. And when you look at this innovation, what you're looking at is you're looking at a 13.3 Quad HD Plus screen that's sitting in an 11-inch bezel of a product. So by us being able to take this innovation go all the way to the edge of the screen, and build a product that still goes on the base of what Dell is good at. We want to make sure that if we're decreasing size, we're not decreasing what the end user can do with the product. So this is for the person, the road warrior, the one that wants to be productive when they're out there in the field, have the value of all the services and support with Dell, but still have that thin notebook to carry around at 2.6 pounds.
And when can we get that?
Right now.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yes.
And the discount code is where?
It's in my bag.
Cool.
It's in my bag.
Awesome.
So
It
yes.
really, I mean, I have to say, you know, obviously we hear a lot about Apple and product design, but I mean, this is one of the more beautiful laptops I've seen in a while, and you know, I didn't necessarily expect it, but it's beautiful.
Thank you, we appreciate
Cool.
it. We're really excited about the innovation here. I look forward to having you touch it. So, now this is our the Venue 87000 series. Those of you that may have seen a little preview of it at IDF, as we officially launched it at CES, and very similar to being the world's thinnest laptop in that smallest in that this is the world's thinnest tablet. It's 6 millimeters, and it was great to hear we were all talking about displays. This is actually an OLED display. It's an infinity bezel across the top of it, and it is the first tablet to launch the Intel RealSense camera. So that is a 3D depth camera that allows us to then make changes to those layers within that photography. So when you come by, I'll show you how we can do that. But one thing I also like to point out is when you look at this innovation and what Dell is bringing to the market, is you're going to start to see this innovation cross through our entire product portfolio. And when we do that, we're also building software applications so that when I have something like the Intel RealSense camera, that end user can very quickly then go into an application and utilize that, not having to go open up their laptop to do something with it.
So you guys have had a long relationship with Microsoft, obviously at the PC level. This is Android.
Yes.
Are you going to do anything with you know, sort of the Surface interfaces and kinds like, or tablets explicitly Android only?
We have both Windows and Android tablets across the board, and you know, we have our relationship with Microsoft is still very strong, and we're building a relationship with Google, and that is strong as well. So we want our end users to be able to come to Dell and decide if I want Windows or if I want Android. You have the selection with us.
This is also indicative of something that I definitely saw at CES, which is, you know, listen, a lot of these TVs for years or components, sometimes you had companies that were about the aesthetics and others were just more purposeful, but the products really are beautiful these days. Form factor on everything from speakers to watches to clocks to, you know, what you're seeing here from Dell. It's really a beautiful product.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Well, we'll get to play in a minute.
Awesome.
Sony, what do we got?
We have basically the compact 4K Handycam, and new addition is the Action Cam 4K. The biggest thing I think that's impressive is the steady shot. A lot of times issues are with camcorders moving fast action, not being stable, and this one has a balanced optical that floats wherever you move. Keeps the imaging nice, smooth, and clear.
Right. So it's basically corrective.
Yes.
Got
absolutely.
it. I know that, you know, what you started to see, certainly phones are a big part of cameras now, but anyone that uses, you know, your iPhone or your Android phone, keeping it steady is tough. And we definitely saw a lot of things at CES where you have lenses now that you can put on the phones, or I don't know if you've seen them, they're quite annoying, but selfie sticks. There are a lot of people walking around with selfie sticks, which is, I think, the marker for the end of the human race, probably. But the, you know, people taking now, you know, the nice vantage point selfie sticks, but nothing compares to, you know, sort of what you see in these kinds of cameras. And again, to the point of you know, the democracy of publishing, it really has moved into video, and the quality is getting to the point where, you know, you often hear Hollywood talk about premium versus not. Certainly, from a look perspective, the average person can make things that are beautiful now and do After Effects. And here's an example of it. So pretty cool.
Yes.
Beam Pro. You know, I want one of these things so that
absolutely.
someone will talk to me all day long.
Okay, well, this is the Beam Pro, and I'll, instead of telling you what it does, I can show you what it does. Kaylee is actually in Kansas City, and she's beamed in. We call it beamed in. And she is physically driving and controlling the unit. Now, Jason, you asked the question, how many of you did not go to CES? Okay. Imagine now we had 100 of these at CES. Now you could save the time to fly to CES, get a hotel room for $400, spend $800 flight, eat $2,000 in meals, you save all of that and just beam in, and you go to CES, visit who you want to visit, when you want to visit them.
So like my father said, why would you ever want to go to the baseball game when you could watch it at home? That's basically what you're saying. Got it. So the idea would be that these things are at rentals at big events and you sort of have your presence there?
Well, we're finding uses for these every day. We're finding uses at hospices. And Kaylee, feel free to jump in so they know that you're real and not a recording. We're finding uses we're finding uses at schools. There's a gentleman named Henry Evans. He had a stroke, and it left him mute and paralyzed. He can't move anywhere. He's able to now beam in and go watch his children play, in the field, or what he's doing now is he's contacting all the museums, and even though he can't physically go, now he has an opportunity to go visit the museums and see the beautiful art that people have done.
Sure.
So we're finding incredible uses. CEOs love these.
Sure.
So CEOs have these in their office now. So instead of people calling or emailing or texting, now they just beam into the office and have a real-time face-to-face and have a conversation like we're doing right now.
So we talked about virtual reality a little. Do you see any hookups with virtual reality companies where you're literally steering this from the headset and seeing it in sort of more definition?
Well, I don't know about that, because if we would be doing that, then you wouldn't be able to see myself on the beam on our product as well. So it would look like I have, some type of helmet on my head or over my eyes, and we wouldn't get the full connection.
Sure.
But
we'd look cooler.
Yeah, sure. You guys would look way cool from your end.
What we are doing is we are putting radar devices on the bottom of these now, so that it could not only assist in driving so that it doesn't run into things, but it could also pre-measure the rooms and give you a virtual depth and feel of the room itself or the environment that you're going into.
So any shot this gets a vacuum at any time soon, like where I could go clean up my sister's house?
Yes.
Yep.
We have had somebody actually request that feature.
Cool.
Somebody does want that out there.
I tell people I'm not crazy all the time. So there's verification. Very, very cool. So Beam Pro, really, really cool stuff.
Yeah. We'll have it out there so you guys can come and mingle with, talk to Kaylee, and if you want to drive one, we'll have a demo station up there so you could drive it.
I want to thank everybody for letting us go a little long, but it really is a great event and some great inventions, and I implore you to go online and see videos of it, and thank you to our guests, and thank you, everyone.